The mower was already on the walk when the door opened, and it was not Dorothy who opened it. Owen Mercer stood on the porch at 20 to 8 on a Saturday morning, the way he had stood there every Saturday for 4 years. He had a thermos of coffee balanced on the porch rail, a folded tarp under one arm, and his daughter's juice box in his jacket pocket, because June always sent one along for Dorothy, who claimed to hate them, and finished every single one. The woman in the doorway wore a gray cardigan that cost more than his mortgage payment and an expression built for ending conversations. She looked at the mower, then at his work gloves, and did not quite look at his face. "The yard service can come back another day," she said. "My grandmother isn't up for visitors." Then she saw him, really saw him, and Owen watched the color leave her face in the exact order it had left his. Camille Ashford, Chief Executive of Ashford Dynamics. The woman who had signed his termination 4 months earlier and stood at the end of a long conference table while 40 people watched him carry a cardboard box out of the building where he had worked for 14 years. Neither of them said a word. The mower ticked as it cooled. Somewhere behind her, in the kitchen that Owen knew better than she did, a kettle started to whistle. Then a thin voice carried down the hallway, past her shoulder, and landed on the porch between them. "Camille, let him in. That's Owen. He's the reason I'm still in this house. Before you keep going, ask yourself what you would do if the person who ended your career was standing behind the one door you knock on every Saturday. Stay with this one. Some of these answers you will not see coming." 4 months earlier, Owen Mercer still had a badge with his photograph on it and a title that took 8 words to say out loud. He was 38 years old, a senior product engineer, and the lead on the Meridian Line, a commercial mower program that was supposed to carry Ashford Dynamics through the next decade. He had a corner desk that was not a corner office, a field notebook with a rubber band around it, and a habit that half the building found charming and the other half found inconvenient. Owen signed everything. Every inspection, every objection, every small doubt got a date, and his initials in ink in the notebook first and the system second. He signed everything he touched. It was the closest thing he had to a promise. His morning started at 6:15 in a small kitchen 2 towns away, where an 8-year-old girl named June ruled from a booster seat she had outgrown and refused to surrender. He made pancakes on Fridays and oatmeal the rest of the week, and he checked spelling lists with the seriousness other men saved for contracts. "Did you check the mirror, Dad?" June asked him one morning that March, not looking up from her list. "You have flour on your ear." He had flour on his ear at the 8:15 stand-up that day, and nobody at Ashford Dynamics told him, which said more about the building than it did about the flour. On the fridge behind June's chair hung a drawing in crayon. 3 stick figures. One of them had a halo, drawn carefully, the yellow gone outside the lines only a little. June had made it when she was 6 and had never taken it down, and Owen had never once moved it, not even to clean. At the test yard that month, Owen knelt beside a Meridian prototype for a long time with a flashlight in his teeth. The hydraulic couplers had come in from a new supplier, a cheaper one, and the fittings did not feel right under his thumb. The alloy tolerances were off by a margin most people would never notice. Owen noticed. He wrote it up on February 11th, flagged it in writing, and sent it up the chain with a recommendation to hold the launch. The chain at Ashford Dynamics ran through the chief operating officer. His name was Victor Lang, and he walked the floor the way weather walks through a valley, smiling, unavoidable, rearranging things. It was Victor who had found the new supplier. It was Victor who had approved them. And it was Victor's signature on a contract that saved the company $4 million a year, a number he mentioned in meetings the way other men mention their children. Owen's flag went up the chain and did not come back down. He filed his copy in the notebook and snapped the rubber band around it because that was the system he trusted most. There was one other person on the Meridian team who kept her own copies, a systems specialist named Priya Nandi, who had worked beside Owen for 6 years and had absorbed his habit the way you catch an accent. She backed up her files to a drive she kept on her keychain, and when people teased her about it, she said the same thing every time. Systems are honest right up until someone needs them not to be. She and Owen never discussed it. It was just a thing careful people did in a building where Victor Lang controlled the weather. That February, waiting for an answer that never came, Owen asked Victor about the flag exactly once in the hallway by the test bay. Victor put a hand on his shoulder, warm as a heat lamp, and smiled. "You worry beautifully, Mercer," he said. "It's why we keep you. Launch is March 1st. To understand what Owen Mercer did next and what he did not do, you would have to go back 5 years to the worst phone call of his life. Hannah Mercer had been the loud one, the planner, the woman who sang wrong lyrics on purpose and left notes in his lunch that said things like, "Proud of you, engineer." They had met when he was 26, married within the year, and had June 4 years later. When June was 3, on an ordinary Tuesday, an aneurysm took Hannah between the grocery store and the car, with the ice cream still hard in the bag. It broke him. He kept making breakfast anyway. That was the whole of Owen's philosophy, if he had ever bothered to write it down. Grief did not excuse you from Tuesday. Love was mostly attendance. He did not say things like that out loud, but he lived them so plainly that June, at 8, already moved through the world like a girl who knew exactly where her floor was. A year after the funeral, he sold the house that had too much of Hannah's handwriting in it and moved with June to Maple Row, a street of small yards and old trees on the edge of town. 2 doors down lived a widow named Dorothy Kessler, 81 years old, sharp as a tack, and stubborn as 2 of them, who was fighting a rusted push mower across an overgrown lawn the first Saturday he saw her. Owen crossed the street without deciding to. He took the mower handle gently, the way you take something from a proud person, and said the only thing that would work. "Ma'am, my daughter needs to see me do something useful, or she loses all respect for me. You be doing us both a favor." Dorothy looked him over for a long moment. "I can't pay you, young man," she said, "but nobody leaves my porch hungry, so you'll lose that argument every week." He mowed her lawn that Saturday, and the next, and every Saturday after that, for 4 years. Summer and fall he mowed. In winter, he salted the walk and cleaned the gutters. In spring, he fixed whatever the cold had broken. Dorothy paid in lemonade and pot roast, and in something Owen could not have bought anywhere. An hour on a porch where a woman who had buried a husband talked to a man who had buried a wife without either of them ever making it heavy. The seasons stacked up gently after that. The first summer, Owen rebuilt the back steps, and Dorothy learned June's allergies by heart and cooked around them without ever being asked. The first winter, when the ice storm took the power for 3 days, the Mercers slept at Dorothy's because she had a wood stove, and Dorothy told stories about Frank until June fell asleep sitting up, and Owen carried her to the guest room past the wedding photograph in the hall. There was a spring when Dorothy had pneumonia and would not call anyone, And it was Owen who noticed the curtains still closed at noon and drove her to the clinic himself, sitting in the waiting room with his hat in his hands, like family, because by then, that is what he was. June did her homework at Dorothy's kitchen table more evenings than not. Dorothy taught her gin rummy and how to lie about it. There was a wedding photograph on the hallway wall. Dorothy at 22 beside a serious man named Frank. And June once asked her who else was in her family. And Dorothy said, "Ah, well, that's a long story for a short evening," and dealt the cards again. Nobody on Maple Row knew Dorothy's long story. Owen never asked. It was one of the kindest things he did for her, and he did not even know he was doing it. The Meridian Line launched on the 1st of March against Owen's written objection, which almost nobody had read. By the middle of the month, the field reports were coming in like hail. Hydraulic couplers failing at hour 200, machines down at 4 golf courses, and a city parks department, a video of a seized mower spreading through the industry with a caption that used the word Ashford as a punchline. The board wanted a name. Boards always do. Victor Lang gave them one. Owen was called into the main conference room on a Thursday, and the first thing he noticed was that the room had been arranged. The launch file sat in the middle of the table, tabbed and flagged. Victor stood beside the screen, with the supplier approval blown up large, and there at the bottom sat a signature line with Owen's name on it. The approval he had processed as lead engineer after being overruled the way the process required. "The signature on the approval is Mercer's," Victor said, with just the right note of sorrow. "I wish it weren't." Owen looked at the file for a moment. His February objection was not in it. He knew because he checked quietly while the room talked about him in the third person. The flag he had written, dated, and signed had simply stopped existing, and the only copy left in the world was wrapped in a rubber band in his jacket pocket. He could have emptied the notebook onto the table. He thought about it, but an engineer's word against a deletion in a room that had already been arranged with a chief operating officer who controlled every system the truth would have to travel through. He watched Victor's face and understood that this had been built properly, the way Victor built everything. At the head of the table sat Camille Ashford, 40 years old, third generation of her name on the building. She had a reputation for being fair and cold, in that order. She read the file they had given her, and the file said what it had been made to say. "We don't need explanations," she said quietly. "We need accountability." And she signed. 40 people watched him carry one box to the parking lot. Not one of them saw the flags in his notebook. He drove home the long way, sat in the driveway until his hands were steady, and walked in smiling, because June was at the window. That night, he made pancakes on a Thursday, which June noted with suspicion and let pass. The story traveled ahead of him, the way stories about blame always do. 14 years of vendors and inspectors and conference calls, and within a week, his phone had gone quiet, the professional quiet, the kind with a decision inside it. One old colleague called from a parking lot after hours to say he did not believe a word of it, and Owen thanked him and meant it and understood that the man could not say it any louder without losing his own badge. Owen did not blame him. That was the part people found strange later when the whole thing came out. He had spent March walking around with the truth in his breast pocket and had not hated anyone with it. Hating, he said once to Toby, is just carrying someone at your own expense. He had a daughter to carry. He had no room on the truck for Victor Lang. Toby Grant ran a landscaping crew out of a yard on the east side, 4 trucks, and a reputation for showing up. He had been cutting the grass at Ashford Dynamics for a decade, which is how he knew Owen, the engineer who came out to talk to the crew about their equipment like they were colleagues, because to Owen, they were. "You know engines and you show up on time," Toby said when Owen came asking in April. "That's the whole interview." So the senior product engineer spent his spring on a mower he had helped design in parks and office campuses, coming home tired in a way that at least let him sleep. The crew took a week to stop being careful around him, the college man fallen among them, and then gave up on the idea entirely, because Owen ate his lunch on the tailgate like everyone else, and could diagnose a hydraulic whine from 30 feet with his eyes closed. When a machine went down, he had it apart on a tarp before the supplier's helpline finished its hold music. And Toby started billing his time differently and splitting the difference with him. No announcement, just fairness, which was Toby's whole personality in one move. The money was still half of what it had been. He did the arithmetic at the kitchen table at night. June's school fees on one side, the mortgage on the other, and moved numbers between columns like a man rationing water. And every Saturday, no matter what, Dorothy's lawn. Some weeks it was the only hour that felt like the world still worked. In late June, Dorothy fell. She went down on the back steps with a basket of wet laundry, cracked 2 ribs, and lay there for 40 minutes before Owen, dropping off June's forgotten library book, heard her calling. He rode with her in the ambulance. He filled out what he could at the desk, and when the intake clerk asked about family, Dorothy, gray-faced and furious about the fuss, finally gave up a name that meant nothing to him. "There's a granddaughter," she said. "Camille. The hospital will have it somewhere. We haven't spoken in 20 years, so don't expect flowers." Owen thought nothing of it. Half the street had a name like that folded away in a drawer, some old fight gone hard. He brought June to visit Dorothy that week, smuggled in a juice box, lost twice at gin rummy on purpose, and did not connect anything to anything, because why would he? The call from the hospital found Camille Ashford between board sessions, in the worst spring of her professional life, and the word grandmother went through her like weather through a wall. Her mother's mother. The rift was older than her career, a fight about her grandfather's shares that her father had turned into a policy. And by the time Camille was old enough to ask questions, there was no one left who would answer them. She had a house 2 hours away that she had never seen, belonging to a woman whose birthday she still knew by heart. She canceled nothing important. She was ashamed of how carefully she checked that. Then she drove out on a Friday night and knocked on a door with paint she did not know her grandmother had chosen, and began awkwardly at 81 and 40 to meet her. On Saturday morning at 20 to 8, someone started a mower outside, then shut it off, then knocked, which is where this story began. The porch, the tarp, the juice box in the jacket pocket. The woman in the gray cardigan who said the yard service could come back another day. And then saw his face and went pale in the exact order he had gone pale in March. And Dorothy's voice carrying down the hallway like a verdict. "Camille, let him in. That's Owen. He's the reason I'm still in this house." The kitchen was small, and it made them sit close. Dorothy, ribs taped, held court from her chair with the teapot in reach, and watched a silence stretch between her granddaughter and her Saturday engineer, until it embarrassed the wallpaper. "You two have met?" she asked. "In a way," Owen said. "He worked for the company," Camille said, and her voice did something complicated on the word worked. Dorothy looked from one face to the other with the expression of a woman who had played cards her whole life. She poured tea and she let it lie, and that was somehow worse than any question she could have asked. Owen mowed the lawn. It seemed like the only honest thing available. Camille stood at the window and watched the man she had fired walk her grandmother's yard in careful, even lines around the flower beds he apparently knew by heart, stopping once to tighten a fence hinge with a screwdriver from his own pocket. That afternoon, Dorothy told her about him not knowing what she was doing or knowing exactly. 4 years of Saturdays, the gutters, the storm windows, the ice on the walk, the little girl who did her spelling at this table, the juice boxes, which Dorothy declared a plague and drank to the bottom. Camille listened, and something under her ribs got heavier by the sentence. She had signed a termination in a room arranged by other people, fair and cold in that order. And the name on that paper had spent 4 years quietly holding up the only family she had left, and had never once mentioned it to anyone, because he did not know and would not have said it if he had. The weekends after that were their own kind of pressure. Camille kept coming, Fridays to Sundays, because ribs heal slowly and estrangement heals slower. Owen kept coming because it was Saturday, and that was the law. They circled each other on the porch with a wariness that Dorothy pretended not to enjoy, while June, sensing intrigue the way children do, adopted Camille immediately and asked her frank questions about whether she knew how to play rummy and whether she was sad, both of which got truthful answers. "A little sad," Camille told her, over cards, because June had a face you did not lie to. "I stayed away from somebody I loved for a long time, for reasons that made sense to other people." June considered this with the gravity of a judge. "That's the worst kind of reasons," she said, and laid down a run. And Dorothy, watching from her chair, made a sound that was almost a word. The strangeness of it was that the porch worked. Whatever the two of them could not say across the history between them, they could hand back and forth through Dorothy and June like passing plates at dinner. Camille learned that Owen took his coffee black and left the last pour for whoever came in, tired. Owen learned that the chief executive of Ashford Dynamics could not cook at all, not even a little, and defended herself with a spreadsheet maker's dignity, while Dorothy banned her from the stove for life. Owen fixed the porch rail he had been promising Dorothy since spring. Camille watched him plane the wood by hand. No radio, no phone, present in his work in a way she had stopped seeing in buildings full of people. "You never once said my name in that building," she said finally. It had taken her 3 weekends to build the sentence. Even when they read the termination, people usually say my name. Owen tested the rail with his hand before he answered. "You weren't the part that mattered." He did not explain it, and she did not push, and both of them understood that it had not been an insult. Somewhere in it, there was even mercy, which was harder to hold than anger. At home, the arithmetic was getting thinner. A school fee notice sat on the counter with a date on it. The truck needed brakes. Owen moved his numbers between their columns at night and said nothing to anyone, because a man who complains about water uses more of it. Then, on a Tuesday, an envelope came from a law firm whose name filled the whole return line. Inside was a severance agreement, unsigned by him and generous beyond sense. 6 figures against the 4 months he had been gone. Attached to the money was a clause with the Meridian launch named in it, worded the way fences are built, a full and permanent silence regarding all matters related. Toby read it over his shoulder in the yard and whistled at the number. "That's not severance," he said. "That's a muzzle with a bow on it." That night, there was a voicemail from a number Owen still knew. Victor Lang's voice, warm as a heat lamp. "Sign it, and this all becomes a bad quarter, Mercer. For everyone. Your girl's tuition doesn't care who was right about couplers." Owen listened to it twice, standing in the kitchen. Then he put the envelope under a fridge magnet, directly beneath June's drawing of the 3 figures and the halo, and left it there where he would have to look at it every morning, because that was how he made his hardest decisions. He made them in front of her. It stayed under the magnet for 6 days. On the 7th day, Owen mailed the envelope back unsigned. With it, he sent a note, 2 lines, in the handwriting of a man who signs things. The couplers failed because the supplier changed alloys. I flagged it in writing on February 11th. I don't need your money to keep being right. He told no one, not even Toby. It was not a move in a game. It was just the only sentence he had left that was fully his, and he was not selling it. What Owen did not know was that 2 towns away, on the same nights he spent at his kitchen table, the chief executive of Ashford Dynamics had started staying late with the Meridian launch file open in front of her. Camille had pulled it the Monday after the porch rail. She read it the way she should have read it in March. Alone, slowly, against the calendar. And the file was perfect. That was what caught her. Real engineering histories are messy, full of doubts and revisions and flags. This one read like a lobby brochure, and at the exact place where a doubt should have lived, February, the supplier transition, there was nothing at all. A quality history with no signature from the lead engineer who signed everything. An absence shaped exactly like a man. She thought about the porch rail, planed by hand, tested twice. Then she picked up the phone and called the one engineer who had left the Meridian team on her own terms that spring, a systems specialist named Priya Nandi, who had quit in April with a 2-line resignation and had been unreachable to everyone from Ashford since. Priya answered on the 6th ring, listened in silence, and then said, "I'll come in, but I bring my own copies, and we do it in front of the board." "Priya," Camille said, "I need what didn't make it into this file." "I know," Priya said. "I've been waiting 4 months for someone to ask." The special session convened on a Thursday morning, 4 months almost to the day since a different Thursday in that same room. Priya Nandi stood where Victor Lang had once stood, and she did not perform because evidence this good needs no theater. She laid out Owen's objection of February 11th, signed and dated from the copies she had kept the day she watched it vanish from the system. She laid out the supplier's alloy substitution and the $4 million. And then she laid out the part that ended everything, the deletion log from the document system, time-stamped in March. 3 days before the termination meeting, executed under credentials the room knew well. The objection existed, she said. It was signed, dated, and deleted. The credentials that deleted it are in this room. The room had been arranged again, but not by Victor this time. Priya had insisted on the full board, outside counsel present, and the original documents on paper, because paper cannot be quietly amended after the fact. She stacked her exhibits in the order a mind accepts them, and she spoke the way Owen wrote, dated, initialed, and impossible to argue with. When one director asked why she had kept copies at all, she looked at him for a moment before answering. Because I worked next to a man who signed everything, she said. You pick up the habit or you feel underdressed. Victor Lang was good, and he stayed good for nearly 10 minutes, questioning chains of custody, questioning motives, questioning everything except the timestamps, which did not care. The room watched his composure come apart in small increments, a man discovering that the machine he had built for arranging rooms had finally been pointed at him. Then Camille stood, and the room got quiet the way it always did for her, and she did the thing that separated her, in the end, from the man beside the screen. In March, I asked this board for accountability, she said. So here it is. I signed a termination without demanding the primary file. We fired the one person in the building who did his job in writing. That failure has my signature on it, and it will be in the minutes. The vote that followed was quiet and unanimous. There was no shouting, no perp walk, no spectacle. Victor Lang resigned ahead of his own termination within the hour, and by afternoon, he was carrying a box across the same parking lot. And the only person who did not watch him do it was already gone from the building's memory of that day, because he was on a client's lawn on the east side, edging a walk with his phone buzzing unanswered in his pocket. Owen finished the edge line first. It was a Thursday, and Thursdays had teeth, and he had learned to finish things before letting the phone decide what mattered. Camille did not send lawyers, and she did not send paper. On Friday evening, she drove out to Maple Row, and when Owen came up Dorothy's walk with June's library books, she was sitting on the porch steps, waiting, in jeans, looking for once like somebody's granddaughter. She told him all of it, the file that read like a brochure, Priya and her copies, the deletion log, the timestamps, the credentials, the vote. She told him about her own signature, and she did not soften her part. And Owen listened the way he tested rails, with his full attention and no hurry. I keep thinking about what you said, she admitted, that I wasn't the part that mattered. I've decided I don't get to like that sentence. I signed the paper, Owen. The room was arranged, but my pen worked fine. It did, he agreed, because comfort that costs the truth is not comfort. And you're the one sitting on these steps. Victor's not. I can't give you back March, she said. I can give you the truth in front of the same 40 people. Reinstatement, back pay, and an apology on the floor where we did it. You can turn all of it down, and if you do, the apology happens anyway. Owen was quiet for a while. Inside, through the screen door, they could hear Dorothy teaching June something about cards that was probably cheating. Monday, he said at last, I bring my own notebook. On Monday morning, the whole floor was gathered, and Camille Ashford stood where the arranged room had once done its work, and read into the record, plainly and completely, what had been done, by whom, and to whom. She did not use the passive voice. When she finished, she turned to the man standing beside her in the same jacket he had carried a box out in. Owen Mercer was right, she said, in writing on February 11th. This company owes him its apology, and I owe him mine. The room that watched him carry a box out stood up when he walked back in empty-handed. He did not make a speech. He asked, first, before anything else, what had been done for the crews still running Meridian machines in the field, and half the room laughed, not at him, but in recognition, because 4 months and a betrayal had not moved him an inch off center. Someone reprinted his badge that afternoon with the old photograph. He pocketed it and went to find the coupler team. The old colleague who had called from the parking lot in March found him at the test bay before lunch and shook his hand too long, saying nothing, saying everything. Priya was already there, her keychain drive retired to a frame on her desk like a service medal. And when Owen thanked her, she waved it off with one sentence that he carried home in his breast pocket next to the notebook. "You signed first," she said. "The rest of us just learned to hold a pen." Dorothy was the last to hear the whole story, because Owen and Camille each privately thought the other should tell it, and Dorothy finally extracted it from June, who had assembled a surprisingly accurate version from Doorways. The old woman laughed until her taped ribs made her stop, then wiped her eyes. 20 years that family didn't speak to me," she said, "and the granddaughter comes back because I fell down the stairs and fires my engineer before she's even met me." Frank would have died all over again laughing. Being proven right, Owen discovered, was not the same as being whole. The two got confused in other people's mouths all summer. Back pay closed the arithmetic in his kitchen, and the school fee notice came off the counter, and the truck got its brakes. But 4 months had happened. June had eaten oatmeal through a spring where her father did sums at night with his jaw set, and children keep books nobody audits. One evening, on their own porch steps, she leaned into his shoulder and asked the question, "Children save until you cannot brace for it. Are we okay again? Or just you?" Owen put his arm around her and thought about it honestly, because she would know if he did not. "We were always okay," he said. "Now the rest of it is catching up." Later that week, Dorothy caught him alone at her kitchen table and put her hand over his, her knuckles like rope, her rings gone loose with the years. "I lost 20 years being right about my family," she said. "Best money I ever burned. Don't you go buying any." He understood her. The field notebook was back in his breast pocket, where it had never stopped living, but he had stopped needing to touch it to check. He went back on his own terms, and the terms were simple. Owen returned as head of product integrity, a title that took fewer words than the old one and meant more. His first act was a standing rule with his name on it. Every field flag from every engineer reached the chief executive unedited, whole, in the original handwriting, if handwriting was what there was. No chain long enough to lose the truth in. The rule circulated with a nickname within the week. They called it the Mercer line, and nobody who used the phrase had to explain it. Toby's crew kept the Ashford grounds contract and got 2 more campuses, and Toby claimed at every opportunity that he had discovered Owen first and that the company was welcome. And on Saturdays, the lawn. Always first, the lawn. Camille happened to be at Dorothy's the next Saturday and the one after until the word happened, wore out, and nobody replaced it. She learned the porch's economy slowly, the way outsiders do, that you brought something you made or something you fixed. And since she could make nothing edible, she started bringing things to be repaired. A lamp, a stubborn window fan, a music box of Dorothy's that had been silent for 30 years. Owen opened the music box on a Sunday, with June leaning on his elbow, cleaned the governor with a toothpick, and when the little tune stumbled back to life, Dorothy stood in the kitchen doorway with her hand at her collar and had to be helped to her chair. And nobody teased her about it, not even June. June rigged the seating at dinner with the subtlety of an 8-year-old, which is none. Dorothy rigged the dessert, 2 forks, 1 plate, and dared anyone to comment. "I didn't fall down those stairs for nothing, you know," she announced to the table in August, apropos of nothing. And June laughed so hard the juice came back up the straw. It was on the porch, in the ordinary gold of an early evening, that Camille's hand crossed the new rail Owen had built and found his, and neither of them made it into anything larger than it was. It was enough that it was warm and unhurried and honest, 3 things that had been rare in both their lives and were not rare on that porch. Nobody at the table was surprised but them. On a Saturday in late summer, the mower started at 20 to 8, the way it always had. Owen walked the careful lines around the flower beds while the light came up through the old trees on Maple Row. June's chalk hopscotch ran crooked down the front walk. On the porch rail sat 2 cups of coffee, one his, one belonging to the woman reading on the porch swing with her shoes off, who had learned which board creaked and stepped over it now, like family. Dorothy watched it all from her chair by the window, keeping score out of old habit, finding nothing to correct. He had never mowed that lawn to be seen, which was, in the end, exactly why the right person finally saw him. The door opened, and this time, and every time after, it was only ever opened gladly.